Hello and welcome. Um, I'm Margit Bantowsky. I'm here with my dear friend Kirstin Eventyr. Kirstin and I have known each other for 25 years. We went to the same graduate school program together. Kirstin is an amazing being, period, and thinker and creatrix and spiritual counselor and energy healer. And she also has a line of flower essence and essential oil magic called Light Blossoms. I'll put those links in the show notes so you can learn more about her. And this is part two, or a follow-up interview to our first Queen interview. And after our first interview, Kirstin made the comment that um, trust is such a big piece of coming into our queenhood, or the magic and potency and capacities of being a queen, that she felt like it would be helpful to talk about trust in more depth and what we can do to cultivate trust. So, in the spirit of trust, I'm just going to be quite forthright in saying that I have not prepared for this interview other than like making my hair look decent for a moment, and Kirstin as well. We don't have a list of questions and we don't have an outline, so we are plunging into this conversation with trust as the foundation of it, and surrendering to where it takes us. Anything you want to say as we begin?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm listening to you enter in, I was just aware it's like, wow, it's interesting because, our last interview, I was feeling very sort of firm and vital and, strongly holding that trust place. And I have today has been a much softer, more tender place that I've been holding. And I was just sort of thinking about that as you were sharing about, well, and then how do we hold trust when that's not really what's on top, you
Mm.
know? Um, and for me, the first place that I go to is just sitting with myself. I was talking with a client earlier this morning about she wanted confidence in her life. She's later in her life, she's 70, and she wants confidence. And we were kind of sorting out what that was about. And it was interesting. What we came to is there's a continued conversation that I think what she means is faith and trust more than confidence. And that as I have aged, I think I had a lot of young bravado that took me pretty far in my younger life. But at this stage, what does the work is love and compassion towards myself and in the face of life. And that love and compassion for myself becomes a trustworthy base
Mm.
for me to operate out of. And that part of how I work with that, how I cultivate that, is that when things are difficult, like that today I just woke up and there was a lot of tenderness and sadness that I didn't have any content about. I didn't know what it was about. I still don't. Um, but before we met, I was just like, oh, you have a lot of sadness. And I was taking care of business and I was like, let's just sit. And so, taking that moment to just sit. And the first thing that I do is not only do I welcome what's here, I don't try to change it. I say it's okay. Whatever's here is okay for it to be there. It's allowed. And I'm just going to hold me and love me and hold on to what is. So that's kind of the first piece that is central.
Mm.
That's even enough sometimes, you know. Sometimes just the like, it's okay that I'm here, is the thing that like creates some kind of opening or relaxation or allowing me to engage life um, a little differently. Um, but then, you know, the next piece is really connecting into a bigger field than me.
Mm.
And so, you know, for me, that is, I mean, I connect with a lot of folks. So, you know, I do a whole process that started with Michele Small Wright of the Perylandra Gardens, her coning process. And so I connect to the overlighting diva of healing. I connect to Pan. I connect to my personal medical assistance team. I connect to my higher self. I also connect to the elementals. I connect to the earth, to the water, to the fire, to nature, to mineral. I connect with those folks. I connect with my personal guide teams that, depending on what I'm working with, I ask to be connected to them. And I connect with my ancestors. I just call ancestors, you know, come on in and support me. Um, there's a lot of different ways I can go with this, but just those two pieces of I'm I'm sending the message that it's okay to be me and to be where I am to myself and all the parts of me that are here. And I'm being held by something bigger than me.
Mm.
Um, which means I don't have to do the holding by myself. And that I think also is a piece that creates trust in life. There, I am being held when the material reality, in terms of like my people, are not near. Um, I that is always available to me, always trustworthy, right? Something I can always count on.
Mm.
And being able to always count on my own loving kindness towards myself and support in that way. Um, those are two pieces that just feel very foundational and fundamental to me. Um, so that's one piece. Um, Another one is I go into my tailbone all day long. I know that sounds a little weird.
Can you elaborate?
Yes, I will. Because so, you know, as an energy worker for all these years, it's really only been in the last little chunk of time, like maybe the last 5 years, that I've really gotten it how I've worked more on the energetic level of things for many, many years. And so when we would talk about like grounding, that would be more of a visualization kind of process. Like I'm imagining, you know, maybe a cord coming down or roots or water pouring through my feet or through my root chakra, which is great, you know, and many times does the work, you know, it does it. But in recent times, I have been connecting with the body as the route to the energetics, where before I was going for the energetics as the route to the body. Um, and so what I've found is that when I bring my attention to my tailbone, and sometimes I'm really reaching behind, I'm like, okay, there's my tailbone. I can physically sense it, feel it. And then I'm bringing my consciousness into my tailbone. I'm bringing as much of my focus as I can to the tailbone. And what almost always happens is once I've like really brought myself there, there's my body's kind of spontaneously does a like there's a sense of relief. There's a little sense of like it just this kind of little bit of relaxation, a little bit of letting down happens. And that in and of itself is where the root does this little tipping into the ground, into that root center, that energy center at the root, that then forms the connection into the energetics. And the reason why this matters is because that root is all about our sense of fundamental trust in having a body, in being here on the planet, of feeling safe, of feeling secure, of feeling stable, of being nourished, of having that sense of belonging.
Mm.
Um, and so, and I have found such a difference. Like, and I don't need to meditate in my root for 40 minutes or anything. I literally will just go, oh, there's my root. Whew, all right. 14 times a day.
Oh, wow.
Just like, just building a muscle, just, oh, right, I have a root. Let's remember that. Okay, there we are. Oh, all right, great. Carry on. Um, because it starts to build a habit in the body of what it is like to feel stable, secure, rested, um, safe, trusting in the present moment.
Mm.
You know, and that's all very root energy center um, energetics.
The image I get is the cyclone, like the spinning,
Hmm.
and to drop into the root sort of anchors the spinning, which is a different place to orient and take action from and make choices from.
Absolutely, because we all have been trained from early on in our life to be skillful with the mind.
Hmm.
And we have all kinds of ways of training the mind. And we have ways of physically training the body, but we don't have ways that train the body, the mind, and the energetics, which also connect us to that more spiritual realm. Um, and so often I've experienced in myself and in my clients, like I'm spinning. I'm trying to figure something out or fix it or figure it, and I've got imaginary conversations going, and I'm wound up about trying to solve a thing, and then it's like that's actually a signal that the mind is not the one to solve it, that the mind doesn't have the answer. It's like become my signal that's like, oh, no, 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 my job was what I'm being told by what that feels like, the sort of spin and scatter, is to drop into the body, that there's something that needs to be experienced on a body level, and it might be emotional, it might be like energetic in terms of sensation in the body that needs to be attended to. Um, but yeah, I think that's really key, is how we bring the storm, you know, into the realm where it can be quelled. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think of boy, there's so many, there's so much here to play around with and explore. I think of you talking about bravado, and that at this time in your life, that's not the place from which action, sustainable action, wise action, um, integrated or aligned action comes from, and how with this mechanistic, rational worldview that we've been indoctrinated with, coupled with the patriarchal dissociation from body, that actually coming into our bodies is a radical act of reclamation and um, honoring of the feminine in a way.
Mhm.
So it sounds simple. Oh, I anchor into my root. And yet, isn't this sort of the mind body split, spirit matter split, that's um, part of the, what's unraveling our ecosystem, and also part of what's the question I have for you? Let me come to my body, out of the head, and yeah, I don't have a question. I'm just sitting with all the pieces and the significance of what seems like simple, honoring the self, jacking into something bigger, and coming into ground.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the only other thing I would add to that is one of the other things that I'll do is then connect in with this whole flow that runs from root to crown and out, so that there is a way that I am anchored into my earth source, body source, and anchored into my multidimensional source. And that includes all of the aspects of my being. It's kind of like a way of saying all hands on deck, you
Mm,
know?
mm,
And so I will genuinely, okay, I'm off. I can feel I'm off in some way. I'm gonna sit, I'm gonna welcome, I'm gonna go into my tailbone. I'm gonna bring my attention into my whole vertical core. I'm gonna call on all my support, and then I'm just gonna be present with whatever comes. And I'm gonna stay with that until it's completed its gesture. And sometimes that's, immediate emotional energy. Sometimes that is, oh gosh, there's something going on, right here. And so I might put my hand on, I'm going to stay with that. And like, oh my God, it's getting so much worse. It's so painful now. Oh, I don't even think I can hardly stand this. I mean, there've been times I've been like, do I need to go to the hospital? But I've done this enough times that if I just stay with it, it's like, no, this is energetic. I did this on purpose. I'm going here. I'm welcoming this. I'm staying with this on purpose. And then it's like, oh, okay, that just released. Whew. Oh, now my solar plexus is so sore. And then I'll bring my attention there. And so sometimes it's like a traveling, following kind of thing. And then there's just a sense of doneness. Sometimes there's a little cookie, like I get a little insight, like, wee, I understood something, like, yay, that was fun. There are some things I have sat with that I've sat and I've sat and I've sat and I've sat, and it's like, okay, I got other things to do. I'll be back. Do other things. Come back. There have been times where I have had something that was really heavy that I've sat with and sat with and sat with, had a remarkable shift and opening. Ah, it changed. Hallelujah. That was hard. Wake up the next morning, back, exactly as if nothing had happened. And I know that it's not that nothing happened. What happened was significant. It just is like now we're at another layer of it. And there have been things I've sat with for a month, that I kept coming back to over and over and over and over again before it shifted. And sometimes I don't ever know what I'm working with. That's the other part of like this deep trust, of trusting that I don't need to understand. That's not the part that matters. The part that matters is giving myself the presence and time and attention to allow it to do what it's trying to do.
mm,
Um, and trusting that my system was designed to know how to be with what it is if I just if I just stop and give it my attention.
mm.
Yeah.
Trusting the process, trusting the intelligence.
Right. The organic intelligence of the system. Yeah.
Mhm. And that's a pretty feminine orientation
hmm
there too.
Yeah.
Um, I want to bridge a little bit between trust and queen. Like mention how in this phase of life, and I roughly, one way to look at the queen years is like late 40s to early 70s. That's one way to conceive of it, just in terms of timing. I'm wondering more in terms of what the not capacity, but what the role, or I won't even say purpose, but what the fulfillment or the full expression or a vibrant expression of full queenness, why trust is so important. I just want to provide a little context
Yeah.
as we, dip back into how to cultivate it, which you're offering some really, really beautiful things, contact self, contact the infinite, come into the alignment, be present, and allow the process to unfold. I mean, this is, we could stop the recording right there and just say, go forth and prosper.
Uh-huh.
I just want to bridge a little bit like, why is this so important for queenhood
Yeah.
and fully expressed queenhood?
Yeah, thank you for a lot of reasons. I mean, I think fundamentally part of what shifts in the queen stage is this letting go of rotting out of that hypermasculine orientation of needing to accomplish, needing to do. And it's not that the queen doesn't accomplish a lot or do a lot. It's just coming from a place of more fundamental trust in my nature, not in because I'm supposed to. Not necessarily because it makes money or because I want to look away to other people, but because I want to get to express my true nature in the world. Like this, like there's this gift at this stage of having some of those things fall away that it is very clarifying that, like, oh, this is what I've got. Like I've got Kirstinness, that's it. And this is the time that I have left to get to experience her, to get to express as her through her in whatever way that happens. And so a lot of that is landed in trusting what arises in me, because if I can't trust what arises in me, like that's not possible, right? Like I don't get to live in that if I can't trust my feelings, if I can't trust my sensations, if I can't trust my own way of perceiving. Um, so I think that's essential. And the other thing is this stage of life, while there is this incredible, I want to say fruits, but that's not quite, like, it's sort of stage wise, it's not quite the right metaphor. But I mean, there's still a sense of things that occur, of how we create and what we offer. It's generative, in that kind of way. Um, but it's simultaneous with increasing limitation and loss.
Oh, yeah.
you know and that's just real, like that's just real. And so, like when I think about it, it's like, I in this last 12 months, a little over 12 months of shepherding my mother-in-law, through her end of life and into her death, what served me was self-kindness and self-compassion and self-love. Um, Not bravado, not confidence, not I'm gonna do a thing, like not at all. If anything, what served me was like, there is nothing to do here. This is a moment that calls for stillness, or this is a moment that calls for trusting the other, and her path, and not being a leader in a way, not there aren't. This is not a stage of life of heroics,
Mm.
you know. It's a feminine stage of life in and of its nature, this sort of trusting, flowing with, allowing, that kind of energy. I don't even know if I answered your question now. Oh yeah, why that it matters. I think that answers it pretty good.
Yeah, I love, well, there's two pieces that I heard you say. One is, we're no longer doing business as usual in the old way, the heroic way, the I was the word that just came was impetuous, and even self-righteous, at least for me, the
Mhm.
driven mind over matter. I'm going to make it happen one way or another. And so that's decaying. That's no longer uh, the the source of creative expression or participation.
Mhm.
So that's one piece. And the other piece, I just love this clear coupling between what's available now, or what the necessity is now, is authenticity. I only have so much time left. I want to live in alignment with who I am. And so this trust and authenticity to bring your Kirstinness to the world fully, unapologetically, means you have to trust what's arising, trust your being, trust what wants to come through, not based on outside measurements of, is it financially okay? Does this look good? Is this an obligation? So it's a pretty radical um, assertion of your authenticity,
Mhm.
or it trust is foundational to radical authenticity.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And if we're lucky, if we've had the resources, if we've had the presence of mind, if life has steered us this direction, if we've made good use of our Chiron return astrologically in the late 40, early 50, time, we've shed some of our woundedness, or maybe even a big bunch of it, or at least we are at friendly terms with it. That we're, what I mean? Like that there's can be some recognition of like, oh, this is kind of the way I am, like, and that's okay. Like I have my limitations based on my wounds. Like when I first started as a practitioner, oh, I was going to heal everything. Everything was healable. You could heal it all. I could do it. Like that's kind of how I oriented. As I'm 35 years into my private practice, 30, 35, I don't know, 30 some years into my private practice, I'm really clear that there are things that are irreconcilable. You know, it's like the death of my mom when I was an infant is not something I'm ever gonna get over. I mean, that's baked in the cake of my internal world. And yeah, that like there has been so much radical healing and transformation as a result of that. And I'm, at this point grateful for how that has all unfolded. It's allowed some possibilities that could not have been possible had she lived through my life.
Mm.
Um, but there's a way that I'm not taking it personally anymore. It's not because something's wrong with me. I'm not the cause and I'm not fatally flawed as a result. Like those stories are off the table. And it seems like that's one of the things that Chiron return does and that happens as we move into this queen stage is we stop sort of believing that our wounds are about us, that there can be more of a sense of like, oh, I got hurt in these particular ways and the scars are not going to disappear, and I might have a little bit of a limp going through. And that's okay. That's how I am. I'm a little limpy, you know? That's not a problem, That's just how I express. So there's a little, again, less heroics and more acceptance.
So your offspring have not so long ago fledged, or are in the process of fledging.
Mhm.
How does that play into your sense of queening and trusting, right? Your attention isn't quite so focused out there. I'm just curious how that's affecting this process of trusting and queening.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge just because I have more attention for
Mm,
myself. I mean, that's I think the biggest part of it. The fact that yeah, that, one of my kids doesn't live here anymore. And the other kid mostly lives at her sweetheart's house, most of the time. That I just have all this space for me to just pay attention to myself and my own fascination and my own inclination, um, which was just not possible really for like 18 years. Um, it just wasn't possible. It's interesting. I'd been telling myself their whole life up until 18 years. I kept telling the writer in me, we can write after I can't take on another baby. Like we can write later. We can't write now. And so I started writing when they were really more like 15, 16. They were, I had a little more space then. And I had this amazing dream that I had a mini fridge, and that there were these snakes that I can't remember how many. There were several snakes that I was keeping in my mini fridge, and I couldn't keep the door closed anymore. They were quiet, they were okay, but I couldn't keep the door closed. And one of them had a chicken egg, a new egg in its mouth, and there was just this strong sense of like, you guys are coming for me, like it's time, I can't do it anymore. And then once I started to like, actually it was the day that I really committed to putting the book out. I had a dream that I woke up and there was this snake. I mean, it was like this big around in my bed next to me. And she was just warm under the covers, languishing. She was so happy to be taking up the bed. It made me so happy. It was like, okay, yeah, my snakes are out of the refrigerator and are in the warm, cozy bed and getting to take up some space.
it's vivid,
Yeah.
vivid. I love the imagery of snakes too. I mean, that's an ancient, ancient symbol of the goddess. And
Mhm.
there's this one from like Crete, I think, and it's this female figure, fully formed, and she's holding snakes.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
It's pretty famous.
Yeah.
So, what's the relationship between trust and snakes? What's your sense of that?
Mm. Well, I mean, I can answer. I mean, it's a great question for me, particularly just because snakes are big in my dreams, and I really rely on my dreams quite a lot in terms of reflections of where I'm at and guidance, and they're an important part of my life. And um, in my early 20s, one of the most difficult times in my life, I was having panic attacks, and I was genuinely kind of feeling like I was going crazy and that the veils were just too thin. I could walk down the street and know what was happening in people's houses. Like it was a little too psychic and I was too tender. It was really a very, very rough and painful, terrible time. And I dreamt at that time of these giant snakes, like snakes that were like 80 feet long. And sometimes they would undulate like this, like up and down, like as they would travel, they were traveling not on the side like this, but like this, and at the beach. And I kept dreaming of them. And when I was in the thick of it, I was like, I keep dreaming of these snakes, but they're never scary. They're never a problem. They're never attacking me. There's never a problem with them. It just felt like they were saying, like, you're in a big transformation process right now. Like you're in it. You have to surrender to this, you know. And snakes are like that. Like when they are molting, they're very vulnerable when they're molting. After they've eaten a big meal, they're also very vulnerable because they, they kind of have to shut down a lot to digest. Um, and as a symbol of the spine and that that energy that connects us root to crown again. Um, that's they have felt like powerful symbols of transformation to me through my life.
Yeah, I get images of, the ancient images of the goddess, the figurines. There's one where she's got lions on either side of her. She's sitting on a throne. Lions or cheetahs, something like that. And and then the snakes. Maybe there's something about queenhood where even though we're letting go of the heroic, there's a different quality of power that's coming online. And what's your take on the relationship between trust and that quality of power? Like snakes are transformative, but they're also really powerful creatures. So I'm feeling this territory of like animal and symbol activation for queenness with the snakes and the power.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, what it makes me think of is being more having the opportunity to because we're less jacked into the culture and more jacked into, spirit and our own nature, and ideally jacked into nature,
Mhm.
right? That our own wildness becomes more available to us, our own feral nature, and we hear about that with queens, like women who just like start just saying things, like they just say the truth, instead of needing to kind of make it nice for everybody, or women who make decisions to, launch into, um, their own their like their own instinct, their own calling, their own aliveness, and that's something that feels really real about snakes, is that quality of aliveness,
Mm.
um, power and aliveness. Yeah.
I'm remembering, I don't know if it was a dream or a meditation with it, or even real, like an image of a mountain lion in a cage pacing back and forth. And that image was with me for so long, just poignant of, for me, heartbreaking, this beautiful animal who is born to roam and leap and smell and climb and not to be confined in this little space. And I finally left my engineering job of 15 years in a cubicle in a state agency because the animal body just, I just couldn't put my animal body in there anymore. That was hard. So there seems to be a bit of a paradox between the queen being of service to the to collective, like the um, calling the collective up, calling, speaking the truth, and calling forth um, a new world, a better world, or a possible world. And there's something about the animal in there too. So, right, there's this relationship to shifting culture, which could be seen as civilization, and yet there's this whole animal side that is part of it, and instinctual and untamed.
Hmm.
I'm wondering if that came through in your poetry too. It seems like your poetry is pretty unleashed
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it has.
powerful, right? It's powerful and unleashed, and it's visceral. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, in one of my poems, I'm like, bite something really hard, break all your dishes. It's like inviting those aspects of us that have been caged by the patriarchy, um, by those sort of systems of oppression, um, in work, in home, in relationship, in the culture at large, of like how we're supposed to look and talk and be, um, and that's just still as real can be, you know. But I think that's part of the gift of Queen is unplugging from it, you know, that we're less plugged into it. There's more of a sense of like, I don't have to do that, you know. I'm not beholden to this, um and I can function outside of it. um it's not needed.
still in relation to it.
Yeah.
You're not exiled, but it's not all a reference or referencing.
It's like the difference between something that's running through you, that you're like part of the web, versus it's not running through me anymore. I mean, not as much as it was, right? I can't claim that as 100% at all. But I'm enough not woven in, that I have enough distance, you know, to be able to go, uh-huh, yeah, I see that.
Enough distance for the wildness to come through too.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. For me to get to be me without the concern about whether my belonging will be intact. And that's also part of the trust, that I can be me and my belonging will be intact, regardless of if I'm jacked into this system of oppression that hurts me, you
Mhm.
know, where it used to feel like the only way I could belong is if I was plugged into the patriarchy. That was what would bring my belonging.
Oh wow, yeah.
If I was successful at, you know, being pretty or getting men to want me or admire me, or, you know, those kind, you know, that was important, that felt important to me, to be seen and accepted in a particular kind of way.
Mhm.
Fortunately, I feel like I got it a lot less in some ways than some people. Um, but God, still, it had its impact.
Yeah. So trusting your belonging,
Hmm.
even as you uncouple from the dictates
Hmm.
of the overculture.
Yeah. And it can feel like flying blind at first. You know, there was so much of me that was not here, but that was sensing here, to figure out how to be the way that I was needed to be so that I would be okay and belong, you know? And so, you know, disconnecting from all of that and holding more here, there was sort of a sense of like, woo, okay, I'm on my own here, you know. And part of that is was really just trusting, like I'm gonna be okay, and there will be more to this. And part of that's having good guides. Like I had some good mentors, you know, and I have some radical friends, you know, and and some, you know, some structures that make sense to me that are outside of it, that also make that possible, to disconnect, to feel the vulnerability of flying blind, you know, without doing this kind of action, and then just letting it be okay that I'm the source
Mm.
that leads me forward, rather than this being the source.
Mhm. That's a pretty profound level of trust that's being cultivated by doing that.
Yeah.
And you alluded to how you weren't alone. You had mentors, you had structures, you had radical friends. So um, sometimes those other figures help us trust ourselves, or at least helped you say, here I am. Yep, yep, you're good. We love you. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, right. You're right. Yeah.
Mm.
And, having that and cultivating that orientation of, well, I'm going to hold on to me, even if nobody else does, and I have this crew that I'm connected to that I appreciate and enjoy and that support me. I can count on that. And there's always points of connection in life.
Mm. Does that feel fairly complete?
Sure.
Or is there anything else about trust that, or this general territory today that wants to be spoken, named, underscored?
Yeah, I mean, the only other piece that I would say is really cultivating curiosity. That feels really key to trust to me.
Mm.
Is that there's a way in which we're kind of often trying to evaluate, is something good, is it bad, am I good or bad, is that good or bad, that there's sort of this looking to qualify, where something is, and and that that binary tends to collapse in on us. I feel good or bad. Does that mean I am good or bad? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that there's a way that then we apply that internally. And I think that there's a lot of trust gets created by just holding oneself and life in curiosity without gaveling down on, this is the way it is. It's good or it's bad, or it's this or it's that, but just staying with, I wonder what this is for me. I wonder what this is for life. I wonder what's going to happen with this. Um, it just creates a little more space to cultivate trust.
Mhm. Oh, that's beautiful, beautifully articulated and named. Um, so as we cultivate our queenhood, this capacity to sit in not knowing and curiosity and wonder, um, forces the trust in life itself, and ourselves and us within that unfolding of life. Like, this is happening. That's interesting. How can I dance with it? How do I move with it? Is trusting there's an intelligence to it. Yeah. Sometimes I even see play linked with curiosity. Can there be, quality of play? Because that opens possibilities. And if the opposite of trust is fear, fear collapses possibilities. So I just love your wonder. I wonder, it feels so opening. And I'm also sitting in um, the nectar and paradox of, like, the queen energy, but the queen leaning into something bigger, right? So we think of the queen as having to shoulder all this responsibility and the weight of it. And there's some quality of some of that, of standing our ground and speaking truth and responding to the moment. But then this curiosity and leaning into something bigger yeah, opens a lot of doors for powerful creative engagement. Okay.
Yay!
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking about this conversation with you and about trust, and realizing that for me, trust isn't necessarily something that I have done a very good job of consciously cultivating. It's more what arises when the illusion of control gets ripped out of my hands, and what's left is trust. What remains is trust when my gripping is forced to chill out, you know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your um, tips and suggestions and practices and modeling so beautifully this passage. As your witness, you have transformed, you have shed so many snakeskin layers that I almost don't recognize you, you know, and yet there's a radiance and um, gentleness and strength together that is just so beautiful, just emanating from you. Very different way of being in the world. And I'm sorry I didn't introduce you as a poet, a published poet. Um,
No problem.
but Kirstin has written a book of poetry that is as luscious as could possibly be, and it's wild and evocative and fierce and loving truth and best medicine ever. So I will put that in the show notes as well. So thank you so much.
Mhm.
Bye for now. Love
Mhm.
you.
Love you too.
Let me stop recording.